All right, we are live for a special edition of the Mike and Mario Show on the road. Excited to connect again. Hopefully, the internet everything works out smoothly. But Manico 64, Mario, how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing well, Mike. And yeah, we're both on the road. I'm in Switzerland visiting my sisters, my mom, and my brother-in-law, and my nephew. And you are in Illinois
Correct.
on a road trip. So
Yeah.
uh, it's good that we could get together. And we were talking about uh, reserve currencies. And if you want to bring up your drawing
Mm,
there that I thought was
right
quite
on
interesting.
time. Yeah. I call it the changing of the monetary order. But I put this together on based upon a prior rendition of the same model here, but I brought it to life a little bit better, I think, with the inclusion of what I call the slow burning of that Federal Reserve note right there. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on it because I think this summarizes everything we're talking about primarily. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think that Federal Reserve note, that burning is almost it should move further, a lot further towards the end there. I think we're a lot nearer to the end. Even the Fed data say that the consumer dollar has dropped by 90, I think it's 96.5% since the
Right,
creation of the Federal Reserve. And
right.
the big question, of course, is uh, what's going to come next. Some people think it's a petro yuan or a combination of uh, different currencies, or some
Yeah,
people think it could be the SDR because the Chinese yuan was allowed into the SDR a few years ago. So who
yeah,
knows? But one thing's for sure: if the powers that be want to keep things in order, and by order, I mean to keep people relatively happy, uh, they'll probably have to back it by real money, i.e., gold and
mm,
silver. I've heard people talking about pegging currencies to a basket of commodities. I don't think that's a good idea because
mm,
most commodities are consumable, and they're very volatile because they are dependent on like natural events, while gold, for example, has about 84 years of stock to flow ratio. So gold is very stable, I think, and silver as well has always been a pretty good
mm.
metal. Bimetallic standards are probably better because there's more liquidity. If you take away silver, that's what they did in 1873. I don't think it's a good idea.
Mm. All right. So speaking of which, let me. Okay. So man, so much in there. Okay. So before I got a little visual aid I want to share with you as well from an old rendition of some artwork done in the 1870s. But one thing you mentioned that I want to definitely chime in on was allowing the Chinese yuan into the basket of currencies. Making up the whole SDR basket or whatever. In my opinion, I think that had a lot to do with just placating towards the East and helping them feel included in the Western's idea of their world order that they're trying to rebrand.
Yeah.
But yet, from a lot of things we're going to touch on today, between all the other cooperations, between the Belt and Road Initiative, Shanghai Cooperation, the Eurasian, so all those entities there are East focused, and they mentioned nothing about the dollar or petrodollar system or the West in general. So I literally think that was a West attempt to include China in their plans for the new world order they always talk about. But I think we're going to find out something different because the East already have their plans, and so we'll dive into that. But
That's a good point,
share your
Mike.
thoughts.
Yeah, no, that is a good point from you, and that I think the West really would, I think that was a token gesture to allow China to be in the SDR, but the
Right.
Americans are never going to allow the Chinese to be as to decide alongside the Americans. I'm not criticizing American people, but the people in charge, they don't want anyone else in charge. They want to be in
Right.
charge, and you've looked at some really interesting articles that you sent me about the Eurasian
Mhm.
Economic Union, which I hadn't really looked too much into, and
Yeah.
also the fact that the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement,
Hmm.
how they're working together with this Eurasian Economic Union, and how
Yeah.
they're actually saying that they want their own monetary and financial system to avoid the dollar. So I
Right.
think you're spot on there that maybe. SDR could be something for the West, but the East will definitely not look to the SDR probably.
Right. Now, let me share with you this little visual, or not a visual aid, but I share this on my Telegram. But this just shows how the criminality has been going on for a lot longer than this particular visual aid, the one we did before, it shows. But this is a drawing from Cures and Ives, which was a famous printing company back in the 1800s, early 1900s. But this is a drawing that came about after the crime of 1873. So this went public in 1875, and so just the words itself paint a picture as to the problems we've been experiencing forever. Because on the left of this, you guys see prosperity and the idea that the greenback was initially labeled as being something that you can redeem, but then as time went on and the removage of silver, the bite metallic standard, all that stuff was done away with. The fat cats on the right happen to have gotten wealthier in a paper sense, utilizing the greenbacks, and the repudiation there of the breakage of contracts, of the redemption side of things, I think is the reason why we're experiencing what we're experiencing now. But I thought this was just so telling, because it's been a 100-year plus event. It's not just like the last couple of years we're experiencing issues of this magnitude.
And in this cartoon, you see the guy with the gold and the coin U.S. Mint. He looks a lot more sober and fitter than the guy on the right.
Yeah.
It symbolizes a sound money society. And I'm not saying everyone's going to be wealthy, because there are people who are going to be wealthier than others. But the guy on the right hand side is a great symbol of where we are today, even here in Switzerland, where I am right now. I remember 30 years ago, the Swiss franc was very, I think it was backed by gold by 40 or more percent. And then the Swiss were kind of pushed into selling half their gold. And ever since then, the property market has gone through the roof here. There's a lot more borrowing and more paper money. And, Switzerland was a haven up until then, but now they've kind of joined in, even though there's still good things going on here.
I want to just ask for jokes and giggles. Who does the guy to the right look like to you? Anything come to mind off of? Let me grab it.
Paper money. Can you put him up again?
Yeah, let me grab it. Where did it go? Who does this? So who just who? Let me put on the screen. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Who does this guy remind you of? Anything come to mind? I mean, not to make fun of overweight individuals, but it's one in particular.
The head of the BIS, Carstens.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So
he's the managing director of the BIS, who's the Augustin Carstens. He used to be
he's Mexican.
The Mexican Central Bank. He's
right.
got
okay.
Scandinavian name, but he's Mexican.
Yeah, so I was going to, the terminology, fat bastard. I think we used that once or twice back in the day. Okay, but so just to shine more light on what's going on, man. That visual aid of just the changing of the world guard. And so as of now, I put to be determined, just because, as I mentioned, I think we can kind of suspect and guess what's next, but yet, whether it's 2022, 2023, who knows? But we're witnessing the change of the guards here. And briefly, Mario, if you don't mind, just because my history is not that well known. It goes back towards the British pound, but just off the top of your head, from the transition from the British pound into the Federal Reserve note, give us one or two things that was probably some gray line areas that most people may not have really taken into consideration of things we can learn from today that took place during that transition, 100 plus years ago.
Yeah, I think after World War I, the U.S. was still on a gold standard, but all the major European countries had gone off gold, and they had a conference in Italy, I think in 1922. It's called the San Remo Conference, to try to redraw the system, but they did a bad job. They made the dollar and the pound exchangeable Actually, no, it was like a hybrid of a gold exchange and a sterling exchange system. And
Hmm.
so they didn't fix anything. They try to say, "Oh, you can you don't we can redeem you with British pounds, paper money, but
Hmm.
we the pound will be fixed to an amount of gold." So it was like a botched job. The San
Yeah,
Remo conference. I think Jim Rickards talks about that in one of his books. Uh, and then gradually, a lot of those European countries got back on the gold standard, but they went back to the rate prior to the outbreak of World War One,
hmm,
instead of devaluing their currencies versus gold because they had a lot more debt. So by
yeah,
1931, after the stock market crash, uh, they were all back off the gold standard, and
yeah,
then the U.S. had to go off domestically in 1933, and that was the build up to another war. So that was the mistake. They didn't really fix. They ruined a gold standard that was worked really well before World War One,
yeah,
and then they didn't really do a good job in this conference. And I think that's the big lesson to learn. I
yeah.
think if we do have some kind of conference today, we have to keep an eye on it and see that something is done properly, because if it's not going to solve the problem.
Right, right. Good point there. So yeah, I wasn't even familiar with that San Remo, so definitely something I'll dive into because I'm going to go back and do a lot of digging into all those different transitions from different currencies and whatever. So I'll
Yeah.
definitely touch on more of that, but interesting stuff there. So for those tuning in, definitely hit the thumbs up on show your support for the channel, and we're gonna keep moving along. So yeah, I got so much stuff in front of me here. Let me just figure this out. But one thing I want to definitely touch on is this right here. We can't move forward really without talking about the recent Federal Reserve decided to, move up a blip, as I call it, move up a blip. But as you can see on this visual aid here, that blip really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But
Yeah.
I guess they're trying for whatever it's worth. I mentioned how, in my opinion, they're already well behind to the point where I think majority of the world that's really know what's going on finds it to be them to be irrelevant at this current moment. But what's your assessment, Mario?
Yeah, the Bank of England as well. They have raised a little more, but they came
Yeah,
out yesterday and said, "Well, we could get CPI at 10%, but our rate is a little higher than the U.S., but it's still just 0.75%." This is like, I guess, someone who's an alcoholic and is drinking, I don't know, 10 bottles of champagne, a rich alcoholic, I guess, 10 bottles of champagne a day. And then he
yeah.
said, well, I'm going to cut back. I'm only going to have 9.5 bottles. You see? So, uh,
Oh my goodness. Yeah,
mm,
at this point, the game's over, and it's just interesting to see how they're at least trying to play the game as if they actually can do some things. So I sent you that little headline. Let me see if I can find it about Bullard saying that they're moving
mm,
too slow, and it's like okay, but where are they really trying to go with this? Because they really can't. There's nowhere to go. Like you go too fast, you implode fast. You go too slow, you at least give yourself a little bit of lifeline before you just realize, for the world realize that you're a joke. But anyway, but about moving too slow here. So are they disconnected? Are they deliberately talking to? This is the whole Fed speak. They're trying to talk, good guy, bad guy within the same entity, or what?
yeah, Bullard, I think he's a propaganda guy.
Yeah,
He doesn't believe anything he says. He just goes out there to managed perception, because I remember 4 years ago when they started raising rates, or even a little
yeah,
before that, and unwinding the balance sheet.
yeah,
Bullard used to be the Uber dove, who used to come out when the stock market was in trouble and say
yeah,
something really dovish. Now they're using it as as a hawk. So yeah, and I noticed that he voted for a 0.5% increase in the latest meeting. He's
yeah,
just, like you said, playing good cop, bad cop, is so that investors and people think that the Fed is actually trying really hard. So we have a lot of disagreement and stuff, but deep down, they want to try to keep inflating as much as possible, because
yeah,
the US government, the US public corporations have so much debt. They can't afford to tighten too quickly and too much, or else they'll bring the whole house of cards down.
Right. Right. Very true. So, if you don't mind, Mario, because I know you're the bond expert here, share with us some of the reactions from this past week in the bond market, and I'm hearing more and more about recession, inverted
Yeah.
yield curve, and it's flattening. And so, I got some rates up right here, but feel free to chime in and give us what's
E-
going on your side.
Yeah, that's right. There are a lot of people talking about how the spread between the 2 year and the 10 year is narrowing. So right
Hmm.
now the 2 year note is at 1.95%. A few weeks ago it was below 150. So that yield has gone up a lot quicker than the 10 year, and the
Yeah.
10 year now is 215. So there's only 20 basis points difference. And historically, when the 2 year yields more than the 10 year, that means it's an inverted yield curve, and it's
Yeah.
always a signal of an oncoming recession. And I think in 2019, we saw the yield curve invert towards, I don't exactly remember the time of the year, and a lot of people said, "Oh no, this time it's different. We're not going to have a recession." But lo and behold, we had a, a recession in 2020. We had the stock market crash in March. Some people will argue, "Oh, that was because of what happened with COVID," but no, the yield curve actually predicted that. So I think the Federal Reserve and other central banks, they'll probably do as much as they can to keep that curve from inverting. Maybe they will sell or let some of their longer term holdings on the balance sheet come off, because that means prices of longer term bonds will go down and the yield will go up. So, but that would be just cosmetic. I think
Yeah.
this is telling us the economies are slowing down.
Yeah.
The
And
bond
so,
market.
as a result of them slowing down, we're going to hear more job owning from the West, and they're going to use more distraction tactics than ever before. And let's get into some of those distraction tactics that could be possibly brewing. You sent me the article, let me put it on the screen here, about the current administration, I guess, probably looking to bully China as well and use them as, and another scapegoat because they're supporting possibly supporting Russia. But yeah, once again, we're going to get into more as to how they're already working together with all the other cooperations. But shine some light on this for us. Biden and Xi conclude talks
Yeah,
at the U.S.
yeah. Even before recently, I mean, when the crisis in the Ukraine kicked off, a lot of people were like already speculating about China and Taiwan, if the same would happen there, and then the U.S. would punish China. That would
Yeah,
be a huge thing as well for the financial system and the markets. Russia is only a country of 140 million, and I
hmm,
think it's number 10 or 11 GDP. China is a completely different animal. It's like 1.4 billion people, uh,
yeah,
probably well, close to overtaking the US
yeah,
economically. And now they're like, I'm hearing a lot of, I was reading that article, and like one of the U.S. officials said, just the fact that China is keeping quiet about what's happening in Ukraine is a really bad signal. So this seems to be, like you said, another distraction to bring in if things get bad. If a recession comes up, that will be a great cover to maybe for the Fed to stop raising rates, maybe even unwind. Uh, you know, the fact that they've stopped QE and start
yeah.
doing QE again, maybe even some more fiscal stimulus from Congress.
Yeah, and oh my goodness, speaking of fiscal stimulus, within the last week, I've noticed different numbers thrown out about the need to provide aid for Ukraine. It's some large numbers. I'm talking about some nice billions. Like billions are now the new millions. Like they throw out billions like it's free. I guess I don't know, but recently, preparing for the possibility of an uptick in the COVID situation here, billions, billions, billions. So they're definitely going to continue to try to pump out more currency for whatever situation they create. But the whole Taiwan situation, I've heard a lot of people talk about, there was, I think, 12 jets flew over Taiwan or Taiwan airspace earlier last week and all that. So the speculation is always that since Russia's made their move on Ukraine, from the way we're being told, perhaps China's going to make their move on Taiwan, and that'll just spread U.S. forces thin, and it'll test their willingness to respond on both fronts if they're willing to, or just hand it over, or what, I don't know. But definitely, I am of the mindset that Xi and Putin, I'm not for them, not against them. I'm just trying to narrate in the way I see things. They are working a much bigger plan than what we're being told here on the West, for sure.
Yes, and Taiwan, I think they produce most of the semiconductor chips.
Right.
And that would be another, big thing. Russia was like the commodities, right? And now, if this happens to Taiwan, I mean, the West hasn't really helped out the Ukraine, because they know if they help them out militarily, it could trigger a much wider conflict, and that's still in the cards, unfortunately.
Right. Very true. So let's dive into some of the things that are unfolding that we are aware of, and I want to touch on because, as you mentioned, if the economy is really slowing down, they're deliberately removing the accommodative policies that have kept it alive for so long, obviously on purpose. And so it's a matter of time before there's some type of banking event, in my opinion. And so I want to touch on and have you shine some light on what was going on in your neck of the woods with the globally systemic important banks and the Swiss response.
Yeah, actually, I met one of the viewers who lives in Switzerland yesterday. It was really nice. He came to see me, and we were talking, and he sent me this. I hadn't seen it. Federal Council, they want to introduce new tools. They say it's to strengthen financial sector stability. That's a euphemism. Basically, if you read through that thing, they want the only two systemically important banks in Switzerland are Credit Suisse and UBS. The rest of those systemically important banks are like in the US, UK, other places, big banks. But if you stop here where it says for resolutions, scroll up a little bit. So for resolution to be successful, scroll down.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
As for resolution to be successful, there needs to be a credible and practical solution plan, sufficient loss absorption by creditors, bail-in capacity, so that the bank can be recapitalized. So, this is basically a bail-in, and they're talking about bailing out as well with taxpayer money. And it's funny because today I met this guy that works with my brother-in-law. He does his IT, his website. He's a creative guy. And I had lunch, but I sat down with him and I was talking, and I had never met him. And we started talking about markets and money, and he was really switched on. And I told him about that, and he said, the system is going to collapse again, or is going to collapse. And he said, when do you think the system's going to collapse? Well, I don't know. And he actually talked about gold, and he said, gold is manipulated, and silver. So in Switzerland, for example, the insurance covers if you have, let's say, 200,000 francs in the bank, 7,000 is insured. So if you had a bail-in here, it would be, you'd lose the 130 after that. So it's quite serious. And, why would they want to bring this in if everything's okay with the banks, the two big Swiss banks? And you have to say that if Switzerland, the federal government in Switzerland is looking at that other countries like the US, UK, the EU, they must be looking at it as well. It must mean that they are concerned about the banking system, especially with the economy slowing down and the system being so leveraged. So,
and so after you sent me that, first thing came to mind on my side was Dodd-Frank. And so over the last couple of years, I went back and forth, diving further into it to better understand it. But yet I know that the regulators and, the banksters itself, they put themselves in a very tight squeeze now since 2020, when they removed all capital requirements for the globally systemic important banks, and then introduced the repo, reverse repo, and all those other mechanisms that they come up with. So it's extremely complicated what's all together. But one thing I do know from the Dodd-Frank Act is that the FDIC, as well as the OCC and all the other entities, they have been put in charge with a peaceful resolution if there's a systemic event in the banking space. And so I just was thumbing through, came across an interesting article that I actually did thumb through, and it just lays out some of the processes that will be required in the contracts and agreements, and it was just quite interesting to see that the play is still in operation.
Yeah.
And waiting for something to unfold. Now, whether or not they updated this or not, I don't know. But this thing here is extensive as to how they're going to bring this thing down or attempt to bring the banks down.
Yeah.
And it has to do with bailing in the creditors and different structures of the creditors, and of course depositors. We are the lowest on the totem pole. we get the worst deal out of everything.
I remember, I think it was probably one of the last years of the Obama administration. They passed a bill to bail out the big banks on Wall Street. Yeah. Their derivatives, actually, with FDIC money, which I found quite outrageous, because derivatives are like betting. And they put it through a National Defense Authorization Act, right? Hidden somewhere. So there is something there already to protect if there's a derivatives meltdown. The taxpayer, we'd be paying, your American taxpayers would be paying for Goldman Sachs and Bank of America, JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, and their big derivatives bets that could go bad.
But here's the thing with the derivatives, that outside of the nominal figure we've been given to, I think, is that 2 trillion or something, or 2 quadrillion. Quadrillion.
The notional figure. It's over a quadrillion, I would think. It could be 2 quadrillion. Who knows?
Right. So that's the thing. I'm sure they don't even know, because where's the paper trail? How do they keep track of all that? And that's where
it wouldn't matter if it's a quadrillion or 2 quadrillion, because it's either one would bring it down.
It's more than they could ever begin to digest. But okay, let's keep moving along. I want to get to some of the little small details of some of those agreements and cooperations that have happened to have flown under the radar. And in particular, last week, let me put this on the screen here. Last week at the same time, so I noticed a date. March 11th was the time frame for that Swiss article that you sent. And then also on this side here, let me put this up here, and let me get this up here. So this little article here, it's in, assuming that's Russian, but yet when you translate it over, it talks about another agreement that took place also March 11 timeframe, and it plays into what we're not being told about, and this has to do with the cooperations between several entities. So we got the EAEU, and China will develop a draft international financial system. And so this was reported on the 14th. So this is earlier this week was this article written up. But in thumbing through this, it gives you a better understanding of what you'll never hear from the mainstream news, or what you'll never really hear from the Western alternative side as well. Just because I think these agreements here and all these operations here, what's it called? Contracts and memorandums have already been signed. Like one of the articles I'm going to show you in a minute talks about Putin and Xi, goes back last year, how they looking to bring the SCO, the BRI, and the EAEU all under one umbrella. Now, could you imagine the type of firepower they would have when they got more than half the population, as well as the wealthiest countries, naturally resource speaking, all under one umbrella? Like, this is that next world order that I think is developing out east that you won't hear much about on the west side of things.
Yeah, I found that interesting, because the Eurasian Economic Union, it's only Russia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, and another country here.
I'll zoom in for you so you can see.
Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, and they don't sound like very important countries, but they're about almost 200 million people, and they've got observers as well, like Cuba, Moldova, and Uzbekistan. But then if you add the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement, you get countries like Pakistan, Iran, and I'm sure they want to bring India in. And it's interesting that the UK is trying to move closer to Iran. There
Hmm.
was a British citizen, a woman that had been arrested in Iran for 6 years, and all of a sudden they freed her. And
Yeah.
you kind of wonder if the West is trying to like save their skin and trying to disrupt this cooperation, in Eurasia. But I don't think they'll be successful. I don't think
Yeah.
the Iranians are going to trust the West.
Right, right. And here's the thing: given the circumstances that the Eastern Hemisphere is in, because I think these sanctions has really exposed how bad things could really get in petrodollar terms. And of course, we got to touch on the petro yuan, the Chinese situation as well. But it really shows how bad it could get if you're not in bed with the West.
Oh
And
yeah.
so it only enforces and incentivizes people to say, we got to speed this up. We got to get off this SWIFT system and come up with our own. So just India talking about, cross-border payments with Russia to try to navigate its situation in case they fall under the sanctions as well. So sanctions have proved more, I guess, harm for the dollar, the people who depend upon the dollar directly, than it does the people who are already looking to move away from the dollar and the petrodollar system. So it's like they're assisting in a sense, or they realize that they've already lost control, and now we just got to make a muck out of everything.
They're also talking about not just the Shanghai Cooperation, but also they call it the ASEAN, which is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So that would
Yeah,
probably include Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam. So it would probably be more than half the world's population.
right. And then when you look at me, show you this here again. So just go to just this little picture here summarizes the area. So if you look at all that area in red, and of course all the leadership of those nations to the underneath that, these are the players that are already they already know what's next. In a sense, they know what's next. And here's the sad part, Mario. I did a video earlier about Ukraine, what's happening in Ukraine with the rollout of the DIA app and a new digital representation of a currency is used through that. So they, unfortunately, all these nations, even though they're moving away from the petrodollar system, they're also going to the CBDC route,
Yeah.
and they also have, the path. You got to have the passports for those things.
Yeah.
So it's
But
like, are they still in bed with the West?
I know. Well, they're not embedded in the West, but I think it's important that we look at this because it's going to affect us in the West. Because all this will mean is there will be less demand for dollars,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to make the cost of living rise in the U.S. And
Yeah.
European currencies are basically derived from the dollar. They're going to suffer as well. And
Right.
we're not trying to say that this is the great new system in Eurasia, that it will be free and fair. We're just
Yeah.
trying to tell you that, you have to wonder, are they going to really stick to sound money? Because, Alan Greenspan said that gold and sound money, statists, people who like big government, they hate that. They hate
Right.
gold in the free market.
It's like
So
handcuffs.
yeah, so you can't, even though they might be using some gold to back their currency, it doesn't mean to say that the general public in those countries are going to be freer, or they might be better off. But
Right. Right. And as I said, for those that are tuning in or just getting on, it's all about trying to navigate and understand history. We're very blessed and privileged to be able to, I guess, see the changes unfold right now rather than having gone through them and then looking back in the history books and say, man, I wish I would have known that this transition was happening. I wish I could have, prepared differently or did this. We're in it now. Like the reset is now. And that's why I said, like, if you zoom in, we're on the gray line right now. Everything happened between 101 and the question marks is today. Anyway, go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
Zoom out again, because I just saw something else as well there that is a bit concerning. For example, let me just go back. Every time there's a transition from one currency to the other, it's during a period of wars and conflict, like from 1920 to 45, because officially the US dollar became the top dog really in 44. So that was like World War I, World War II. And then if you look at France there, 1815, what happened in 1815? Well, that was pretty much the end of the Napoleonic Wars in Europe, which were about 25 years or so. And then you go to the Netherlands there, 1640. That was right in the middle of the, I think, 30 Years' War in Europe that lasted from 1618 to 1648. So that's what's we need to look at this and see. Yeah, it's not going to be a very stable
Smooth
period.
and pretty transition, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that it's all going to be bad, because there's always opportunities if we can navigate through this, and it's not easy, but we'll try.
Right. I'd rather be informed and aware than asleep and
Yeah.
completely oblivious to what's going on, just for comfort's sake, I guess. But
Hmm.
all right, so let's keep moving right along. And so we're about that 35-minute part, and I'm on Wi-Fi over here, so I don't want to have any glitches. I just noticed you froze for a minute, so that could be a sign. But let's get to some questions or whatnot, or let's real quickly just touch on, because I did a video. I know you did a video as well, Mario. But the petro yuan, is that? I mentioned it's old news. It's just made publicly now at this current time because of all the chaos around us. But the deals were already signed well before now. But what are your thoughts on this? Was this like was this controlled by the West, by them allowing this to reach our airways on the West, or was this the East making it known that, hey, this is what's on the table, deal with it, type of thing? What do you think?
I would say the latter. I don't think the West want people to know about the petro yuan. And I mean, there was an article a few days ago in the Wall Street Journal talking about this, how Saudi Arabia is actually wanting to price a lot of their oil in yuan, and that they're negotiating with the Chinese. The Wall Street Journal said, well, it's not really definite. They try to play it down, but I think it's quite serious. And we saw yet last year as well, right after the fall of Kabul, when the U.S. August 15th, which is an interesting date, U.S. troops withdrew, and right after that, the Russians signed an agreement for cooperating with the Saudis on defense. And well, I thought the U.S. was supposed to be cooperating with Saudi for the petrodollar. The other thing, I think the Saudi Arabians now, and I made a video about this earlier this week, petro, and I forgot to say, is that they're concerned. Look at how the U.S. they didn't do a great job in Afghanistan, did they? Militarily, they're supposed to be there to protect the Afghan government, to engineer a transition to leave, and they didn't do a good job. So that the Saudis are saying, we can't really depend on America to help us militarily. Right. Look how they screwed up Afghanistan. That's the other problem as well.
Right. And speaking of which, go back to just real quick. I got it. I want to make sure, I want to emphasize how important Afghanistan is to the Eastern collaborations out there. So this article here, read through it, go all the way to the bottom, and it talks about how all those countries that are involved, how they literally have some special agreements for Afghanistan. So this was as of last year, and this is as what is the 2002 SCO Dunshabi, the declaration spelled out for Afghanistan is quite revealing. So they got some things in mind as a collective unit that has Afghanistan as a very important strategic play for them in their partnership. So it's just the fact you hinted on Afghanistan. I want to bring that up real quick. So Afghanistan obviously is very, very important for more than we probably are aware of on the West. But so once again, it was, I think Biden gave the keys over, and now it's in China's hands. So we'll see what they do with it. But I guess let's get to some questions if you want, Mario, before we get ready to dial back and see if you might got any thoughts or questions. Also, metals, we got to touch on metals. We can't go a show without not touching on metal activity. I noticed that after Jerome Powell's little spiel, we got some green activity. But as of right now, it looks like we got a little red. Not that it matters, but it's just, it's just entertaining to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I would say silver is very frustrating. We're still just around 25. And when gold was at 1920 in 2011, silver was at 50. So still highly undervalued. But I've noticed the metal, the mining stocks are holding fairly well.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, gold is at the FOMC when Powell was speaking. We dipped below 1900 and we came back up though yesterday to 1950, and we're still above the 1920 level, which is a
Hmm.
good thing. But I always try to, when it gets frustrating like this, I always try to think of the alternative. Do I want
Hmm.
to convert my gold and silver into fiat and put it in the bank? No. So
Right.
that just does it for that's the way to cope with it for me.
Yeah.
The
Right. Same
alternative
here.
is not any better.
Right. And also outside of all the other issues we're experiencing, I see more articles about food crisis, gas. And so more people will actually take those monetary units and convert them into real things. And of course, calories, metal, weight, ammunition, whatever you consider to be a valuable store of utility for yourself in the future, present and in the future, right now is as cheap as it's ever
Oh,
going to be.
there's a
But
question here from
go ahead.
low blood pressure. Mary,
Go ahead.
your visit or plan to any coin shops in Switzerland? Um, well, I'm up in the mountains and it's not near a big city, so there are no like coin shops around here. So I'm not really planning to do that. I will
Yeah.
be, I guess, in Zurich Airport on Monday for a while.
Hmm.
But in Switzerland, there probably are coin shops and they have online stores, but
Yeah.
also the banks they buy and sell gold coins in the banks. But to do that, you have to have an account with the bank. You can't just walk in and do it. But I remember over 10 years ago, you could go in the bank without having an account in Switzerland and buy
Hmm.
gold. But they've cracked down. They're more and more control. They
Hmm.
don't want someone just to walk in and with some cash and buy gold. You have to have
Yeah.
an account. So I'm not planning to do any, stacking in Switzerland.
Yeah, I see LBP mention petro gold. So
Yeah,
I can imagine sometime soon we're going to be hearing some type of shocking announcement, about the linkage of gold referred to or priced or oil rather priced in some form of weight or some basket that will definitely
Hmm.
be gold focused. Because
The
of course,
thing is, if you back the U1 with gold and you only accept U1 for oil,
mhm,
then it's connected there to gold.
yeah,
I mean, you don't have to back call it a petro gold. If you call it just a gold back to one,
mhm,
and people will definitely try. They will want to trade. If the Russians and the Chinese announce a gold backed system, that's the end of the Western fiat currency system. I would say
yeah.
might not be overnight, but it's will really accelerate.
Yeah, here's another thought. Let me put this on the screen. It says, "Why aren't we producing our own oil?" It says, "Brandon Light begging foreign countries." I
Well,
guess.
actually, I don't agree with that because the U.S. is the biggest oil producer in the world right now. They just don't produce enough, I guess.
Yeah, it's
And
so, and that's.
number
Go
two
ahead.
is Russia or China,
Mhm.
but the U.S. is still the biggest oil producer. I know that Brandon cut off a lot of production, but
Yeah, and so like even in the state of Michigan, they're trying their best. Governor's trying to, I guess, eliminate the tax on the oil, the gas tax, whatever. And so she's actually resisting that. I think, like she does not want. I think a good portion of the House representatives in Michigan that happen to be Republicans, so they go back and forth a little bit. So the fact that she's not for cutting gas tax, that will save people at least 20, 30, 40 cents at the pump, but she's not for that. I'm thinking like, is this more of that push towards like that going green, where they're trying to actually destroy the oil industry itself within the U.S. so that Biden could get on the phone and get denied phone calls from Saudi and everywhere else.
the other thing is, well, they're going on a lot about oil, but deep down, the reason why commodity prices well, they're not even going up. It might sound silly, but no, it's the dollar and all other currencies that are going down.
Right.
So, how come we had enough oil before 2020?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
there wasn't a problem. And the U.S. is still, as I said, the biggest oil producer. So it's all a thing. I think it's the currencies that are collapsing, and it's not. And even if they try to, not just the U.S. but other countries to try to produce more oil, it's going to take a while to get it going.
Yeah, very true. Here's another question here, and then we will get ready to dial back just because I'm noticing computer fan kicking on a little hot here. Let me get this. It says, here's one from George, or if you see something, Mario, feel free to chime in. But it says, when and where does social unrest begin? And my response would be, it's already present. It's just it's in isolated pockets where you may or may not hear about it, and you definitely won't see it on your mainstream news for sure.
Oh yeah, the mainstream. I mean, it started with the yellow vests, in France. That was what, 2017,
a couple years ago. Yeah. So it's here. It's in certain pockets, but by the time you hear about it on your local news, it's too late because it's probably happening everywhere. So I'm not mad that I don't hear about it on the news. And another thing is the truck convoy in the U.S. started I think 2 weeks ago, but I didn't hear nothing about it. So I'm assuming they made it to D.C., but it got no television coverage or even no social media coverage from what I was able to see. So, what happened to that? I thought that was going to be something. I thought it was more of a false flag type of a setup or something. But anyway,
there's an interesting comment there, Anthony. I work in Texas oil fields. Let me tell you, we can easily supply our own oil and gas, but exploration production companies decide to export a SHIT ton of it overseas through the ports of Corpus Christi, I assume. Yeah.
Okay, that's some fresh intel right there. I wasn't aware of that. So, are we sabotaging ourselves deliberately? we're sending more abroad while claiming that we don't have enough or we need more.
Maybe they pay more abroad for it. Who knows?
Yeah. All right. Well, Mario, we have 47 minutes, man. And, as I mentioned, I'm glad to connect with you on the road. Be safe on your way back and enjoy the rest of your stay there with your fam. Enjoy yourself. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. And for those who might be new, Manigo64 on YouTube, Rethinking the Dollar everywhere you can find me. And we just try to narrate and cover what's happening in the real world, give you a different perspective because you won't get it from your mainstream news sources. And at some point, you might want to turn off your mainstream news altogether because they're lying to your face, in my opinion. But Mario, want to sign us off?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mike. And I hope you make it safely back to Michigan as well from Illinois. And
definitely.
It was nice speaking with you here from Switzerland. And yes, they're feeling it here too. Prices are rising here too, everywhere.
Yeah, it's heading into spring. It's going to be very interesting to say the least. But anyway, guys, be blessed, be safe, have a great weekend, and we see you guys later. Peace.